Carrie Height. I'm your Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services Director, and we are here tonight, more of a celebratory evening than a business meeting, and it is to celebrate the fact that the city did close on the Civic Center playfield. It's an 8-acre site, and we are delving into a master planning process with the community. And to that extent, we have gone through a little bit of process so far. We have published an RFQ to the public to come and make a bid on this project, to be the architectural firm that would help us with the master planning process. And we received 8 submittals, and we had a smaller staff team that we narrowed. We had a pretty objective criteria that we had laid out, and we narrowed it down to 3 interviews. And we also have put together a project advisory committee that will help guide this process in and out of public meetings and in and out of planning board and city council meetings. And we had 3 or 4 people from our project advisory committee and some staff sit in interviews, and our council member Dave Teitzel was part of that interview process as well. We had 3 firms that came in, and we had a pretty laid out interview process for them. We had them do a half-hour presentation, and then we followed up with 15 minutes of questions and answers. And the half-hour presentation, we asked them about what their approach would be, what their public process would be, because we know that's going to be very important for Edmonds. We asked them, thinking outside of the box, what are your creative and/or innovative ideas, from a blank slate? And so they came in with those as well. And we asked them about their experience and other master plan processes they've done on a project this scale. And from the 3 interviews that we had, Walker Macy rose to the top, and it was very unanimous from the committee, by far unanimous, to select Walker Macy to come and work with us, with our community, to do a master planning process. And so we're still in the process of looking at a scope of work and negotiating. We have not finalized the scope of work. We wanted to have this kickoff meeting first to see if there's some interest by council to add to the scope of work or not. But we wanted to have a kickoff meeting, and I met early on with Council President Johnson, and we talked about the master planning process. And I think it was her idea, but she says it's a joint idea to have this kickoff meeting and to really go through the process with the council and the community and our project advisory committee, and see if we're all comfortable with the process as we go forward, and really celebrate the kickoff of the Civic Master Plan. I do want to say that the packet that I put together for tonight in your agenda has the proposal that was, and the scope of work that was proposed by Walker Macy. And in that, there are some schematics, but I do want to tell everybody this is a blank slate. We are starting with a blank slate for Civic. Those were some ideas that they brought forward to show us how creative or innovative they could be in their thinking process. And we wanted a firm to work with us that could be creative and or innovative in their thinking process, but also could bring in all of the input from the community and apply that creativity and innovation and come up with a really good win-win plan that our whole community can buy into. So I want to just put that out there. It's a blank slate. I just don't want people to look at those schematics and say, what? It's already planned. It's not. Okay. It's a blank slate. We're starting from 0 on this, and we're very excited to be engaged in the community. I do want to let you know that I did reference the project advisory committee that we've put together. Many of them are here tonight, and I want to recognize them so that everybody in the public knows and the council knows who is our citizen project advisory committee that's going to help drive our public process and our master planning process. So I'm going to call your names, project advisory committee, and when I call your name, if you could stand up so that we know who you are and that you're part of the process. Alex Wittenberg, Barbara Chase, I don't think Barbara's here, Bob Reinhardt, I don't think he's here either. Francis Chapin, we do have some staff on the project advisory committee. Rob Chave, Dave Teitzel is on our project advisory committee. Diana White, thanks Diana. Dick Van Hollebeck is on our project advisory committee. Doug Sheldon, Emily Scott, she was here, yeah, there she is. Joe McElwain, John McGibbon, thanks John. Kyla Blair. Kyla Blair is a youth member that we have on our project advisory committee that we'll be connecting with. Leslie Kaplan. Thanks, Leslie. Rich Lindsay and Renee McRae are also on the project advisory committee. Mike Eckelbarger. Stephen Shelton. And Valerie Stewart. So thank you, Project Advisory Committee, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. They will be tasked with meeting more frequently than the council, more frequently than the planning board, more frequently than our public open houses. And they have committed to this process, and we really appreciate their assistance. Well, what I really rely on a Project Advisory Committee to do is to help the consultants and myself synthesize all of the public comment and make sense of it, and help drive some of the guidance and guide us as we go through with plans. We will then be bringing plans to the planning board and to the council. We'll have 3 public open houses total. We'll also have virtual online open houses. I'm not going to go into it all because Chris and Anne Marie are, but that's all I have to say. We're going to go through the schedule with them, but I'd like to say thank you to Walker Macy for coming forward with such a dynamic proposal. We're very excited to work with you and introduce Anne Marie Schneider, and Chris Jones. And they're going to take it from here. They have a great presentation for us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And I don't know, can everybody see the screen? Do we want to turn off a bank of lights or keep them on?
You stand in front of it.
All right. I could also go on this side, maybe easier. Well, good afternoon, late afternoon, evening, everyone. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Chris Jones. I'm a principal and landscape architect with Walker Macy. We're a Portland-based firm that recently opened an office in Seattle, and I'll talk a little bit about that and our qualifications and why I believe we were selected. And thanks, Carrie, for the nice words. I want to start off by introducing Anne Marie Schneider, who is our project manager for this effort. Some of you may recognize me. I worked with Carrie and her team on the recent Marina Beach master plan effort, which was recently adopted by City Council and was a very successful public outreach effort. I reiterate also what Carrie mentioned. These projects are as much of a community building process as they are a design process. I'd like to think that they're actually more of a community process than they are design. We're here as a conduit for you all to tell us what you want for your downtown park, and we're only as good as the information we receive from you. So we don't come, as Carrie mentioned, we don't come with preconceived notions of what this park should be or what it shouldn't be. We have great experience of what other parks have done and what has been successful, how operations and maintenance works, what should be dedicated to that, some park program ideas, but we're really here to work with you on the process of what that park should be, and it really should come from you. We also want to start, I'm glad that we're having this meeting. Many municipalities don't have this kind of kickoff, and I think this is extremely valuable because the success of this park is based on building champions, and you all need to be champions of this park. We can't do that for you. We could come up with a great design, but for this to be a truly successful park, it needs to be championed by the community, needs to be preserved by the community, and it needs to be managed by the community. Not only Carrie and her parks team, but the community really needs to take care of this space and champion it, and this is the place to start. So I'll start off introducing the team, and a majority of the team is not here. Anne Marie and I are representing the team that we put together specific for this project. And we put this team together based on a number of things. One is our working relationship with them, that we've had successes in other municipalities, other cities, other states with these individuals, and we bring that experience to you. I'll start off with Owen Richards Architects. Owen Richards is a Seattle-based architect. We are currently working with him on the redevelopment of Volunteer Park in Seattle. You may know Owen's work at the Seattle Center. He recently completed the new Chihuly Museum within Seattle Center. And Owen and I actually worked together on the Olympic Sculpture Park. He was the arts programmer for the Olympic Sculpture Park on where art should be sited, and we know that that's a valuable piece of this project and a valuable consideration to your community. Enviro Issues, we worked with Enviro Issues on the Marina Beach master plan effort. They are a public involvement facilitator. They bring a lot of value in managing our open houses, managing the feedback from you so that it is presented to us in a way and to you in a way that we're regurgitating that information in the most accurate way and capturing the community sentiment in the best way possible. KPFF is a civil and structural engineer. We will be using them in a civil engineering capacity. Because this is a master plan, it's a really high level effort. We won't be getting into actual design, but they will be advising us on sustainable stormwater and infrastructure strategies for the park. And last but not least, John Bales is our cost estimator. Obviously, cost is a significant component to any capital project, and we'll want to capture the costs of the master plan as we move forward. So what we wanted to do this evening was I was going to introduce a little bit about Walker-Macy as quickly as possible, and then I wanted to focus on the park, but I wanted to introduce us and lay a foundation for the work that we've done in the past. We've been in the Northwest for just over 40 years. Doug Macy is a founding partner who's still actively involved in every project in Portland and in Seattle. The success of the firm in designing downtown parks is really based in designing parks that are both flexible, programmable, and durable. And I'm going to quickly define programmable because not everybody understands that term. So programmable is when you talk about a public open space and you talk about activating it with programmed events. We have found that the most successful downtown parks are successful because we program them. We keep them active, we keep them safe, and there's always eyes on the park, so to speak. So we bring that knowledge of not only design but how to program these spaces, which makes these spaces very successful. You may recognize this project. This is, I would consider, a legacy project for Walker-Macy, and it's really the gold standard for downtown parks. I'm not showing it as necessarily an apples to apples of Civic Field because it's a different scale, it's a different context being in downtown Portland versus downtown Edmonds. Much more denser urban space. However, this is a project that we completed in 1983, that Doug Macy completed in 1983, established the foundation of the firm as a designer of downtown active parks. Doug has remained on the board of directors for this park ever since 1983, and there's a lot of lessons learned, and that's what we bring to you as an understanding of, what is that, close to 40 years of seeing how Pioneer Courthouse Square in Portland is managed. This is arguably the largest, I would say that this space has the largest amount of programmed events on a yearly basis within the United States. There's over 300 events a year. It's managed by a 501c3, and I think that's something we'll want to talk about is how this park, Civic Field, is managed and operated over the life of the park. So we have continued the foundation that Doug Macy established in the firm in Portland. We opened, Laura Rose, the lead designer, and I opened Seattle office in 2014. We've continued that work, and we're working on some of the most significant public open spaces in and around the Puget Sound, most notably Victor Steinbrook Park within Pike Place Market. Anne Marie and Laura have been working on 13 parks and gateways within the Pioneer Square neighborhood in south of downtown. So project understanding, your city is very vibrant. You have a very vibrant downtown. Your civic pride is visible as you walk through downtown. I think it's great that this property, the Civic Field property, is so close to downtown, and there's a great adjacency to build on that energy of downtown. You also have a great collection of parks within your system, and a lot of credit goes to Carrie and her team. A lot of these parks are very natural and very soft. You go through them, Yost Park, Edmonds Marsh, some of your waterfront parks, Brackett's Landing, Marina Beach. A lot of these are very soft parks. They're not heavily programmed. City Park is one of them that's a little more programmed, I think, than others. But it really serves the Edmonds community proper. It's not a regional draw, so to speak. And we see Civic Field as being different than that, supporting what you already have in your park system, but really providing a different kind of service and a different space for much more significant cultural events. And we think, and this is part of the conversation today, if that space should make Edmonds a more regional draw than it already is, because your community is a big regional draw. Being on the sound and having some of the amenities along the water, Civic Field may want to further support that. It's also our understanding that Civic Field will continue to support some of the passive and active recreation that it currently does, and it'll also continue to support some of the festivals, i.e. the Taste of Edmonds and the 4th of July celebrations that it currently does. So public engagement, I mentioned this a little bit already, but the most successful projects are rooted in the public involvement process, and I can't say that enough. And we see that this project is very similar to that, and we're going to build on the energy of the Marina Beach effort. We learned a lot through that effort of what works with your community and what doesn't work with your community, and we want to bring that energy to this project. Thank you, that's all right. I'm going to test a little bit of Carrie's knowledge. You know, I mentioned that the public involvement process being so important to this effort, and we established 2 goals at the Marina Beach effort. I won't test you, Carrie, but I remember them very fondly. One goal was to balance the needs of all park users, which is challenging in itself, and I think we bring that to this project too. There's going to be a lot of voices, a lot of people coming with different ideas and programmed events, and that's something that I would say that's priority 1 for Civic Field, is balancing everybody's needs and making sure everybody has a fingerprint on this park so they could call it their own. Secondly, is we had a goal of making this a fun effort, and I think we did that very successfully with Marina Beach. I thought it was a very positive effort. It was a community building effort with your community, and I see that being also a goal for this project. I'd like to talk about other goals when we're done with this presentation. So one of the things that we learned through the Marina Beach planning effort that was very successful is having a very robust public outreach process that precedes every city council briefing, every city council meeting, and every planning board meeting. And one of the things that we found that is why this is so successful is that there's kind of a self-moderating process that goes on with the community that we saw with Marina Beach, and that everybody starts seeing the importance of the other person's views. And rather than showing up at city council with, well, I'm not getting this or that, everybody's kind of self-moderated during this public involvement process. We'd like to bring a similar public involvement process to the Civic Field project, and that includes public open houses. We're going to be doing one-on-one stakeholder interviews with folks over a 2-day period. And we're also going to have a location within the park to be determined that will be a kiosk of sorts that can allow for feedback during the whole process of the design effort. Our public open house schedule and general project effort. This is, I believe we're going through a 9-month effort or so. Our first open house is going to be a month and a half from now, which puts that in mid-June. That first open house is going to focus primarily on park programming. So we'll be coming to that meeting with ideas on how the park could be programmed, what are the elements that we started hearing from yourselves, from parks, from community individuals, and it's really a brainstorm and a charrette of what are everybody's ideas. Let's put everything on the table and start talking about what this space could be. 2 months after that, we'll have our second open house. These red bars, by the way, illustrate open houses. The second open house in mid-August, we will bring alternatives for the Civic Field Master Plan, which shows design concepts. We'll take your ideas of what elements should be within the park, and we'll configure those in an understandable way, and we'll present them in August. The third and final open house will be in October, and we will be presenting a preferred alternative during that time. So in parallel to the in-person open houses, our stakeholder outreach, we also found a lot of success during the Marina Beach effort with the online open house. Not everybody can make in-person open houses. Not everybody's comfortable speaking out in public open house venues. So we found that we get a lot of positive feedback and a lot of quality feedback through the online open houses. And in Enviro Issues, we'll be managing this. We ask pointed questions. We ask questions about programming, safety, what do people want to see in the park, So we get a lot of great feedback, and all that will be summarized in our master plan. We'll also bring it to the in-person open houses of what we've been hearing to further support what we're hearing in person. So there's a lot of other outreach alternatives that we'd like to talk about. We presented these at our interview. You know, the social media is a great resource for a lot of people that, again, don't want to come to an open house. We'll be working with Carrie and Renee of, going out to My Edmonds News and Facebook and a lot of these other social media outlets and reaching out to individuals. The more feedback we could get, the better. And as I mentioned, we'll be having 2 days of stakeholder interviews. I forgot the total number of stakeholders we have. I want to say it's around 20 or so, but we'll be conducting in-person one-on-one interviews with stakeholders. I think that's 2 weeks from now. So I'm going to hand it off to Anne-Marie to talk a little bit about site context and some initial thoughts for the park.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Civic Field. So this is actually just some of the site context observations and ideas we started to put together for the interview, and just starting to appreciate this special place that you guys have here, and zooming out a little bit and looking at the ecological context of Civic Center Playfield. You've got these pretty amazing habitat spaces that can surround Edmonds that you guys have done an excellent job of also making into destinations as well as, habitat spaces. But then you kind of have these two spaces, Edmonds City Park and really Civic Center Playfield, that are a little bit more on the interior and are going to be responding a bit more to the urban context and maybe a little bit less to the habitat. But being conscious of how this plugs into the overall ecological context and the important role of just having green spaces in the urban context as well for stormwater opportunities and canopy and all the wonderful things that come along with green space in the urban context. But it's obviously going to be serving a different purpose than some of these other parks on the exterior of Edmonds. We've also thought a lot about the park edges, and we think successful urban parks respond and are in dialogue with their edges. And we've got a couple of different conditions going on with Civic Field. We've got single family on the east side up the hill, and we've got multifamily on the north and south, a little bit denser residential situation. And then we've got this really active civic edge on the west side, which has municipal, you've got police and fire, and we've got farmers markets going on and arts corridors and a really rich sort of civic edge going on, and that we're envisioning that that's a really active edge to the park. We also think a lot about connections and how circulation works with the park, around the park, how it connects to other things that you need to get to and from. And so, there's some key connections here at 5th Avenue and Bell Street with the markets and plazas you have going on there. There's some really great opportunity on the 6th Avenue edge connecting up to the Edmonds Arts Center. And then we've also been looking already at this sort of long-term vision of this arts corridor on 4th Avenue and how you kind of end up with this sort of circuit that starts happening around town, where Civic Field has a really important role in that. And then also just thinking about the residential users on the other side and how they might want to start strolling through the park to actually get to some of these activities on the other side. So just initial thoughts on sort of how the park interacts with its surroundings and how you get around. And spectacular views. You guys have no shortage of these going around, but that's something we think we can also capitalize on here. And this is actually the view from the streets above the park, which we think is also really important. So you not only have some really good views from the back edge of the park, of the mountains, but we're also aware that the residential neighborhoods and the streets and everybody that's sort of above have these panoramic views where the park is actually their foreground. And we think that's also a really interesting opportunity to think about and has a lot to do with how the park is designed. And we think, again, there's opportunities to frame views within the park that aren't really being utilized currently. I think Chris is going to talk a little bit more about park program.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So as we move forward, this was a little bit of a recycled content from our interview, and Carrie and her team asked us to start looking at potential ideas for the park, big picture ideas for the park. And there's a caveat to that. We have not engaged the community yet, so these are just responding to the interview questions for dialogue at our interview. But we wanted to talk briefly about park programming and how we would approach park programming from a design perspective. And a lot of that is going to come from how you program that space. And when I talk about programming that space, I mean specifically the Taste of Edmonds, which takes up a significant portion of that park and is really going to drive how we design the park, where different elements could go. As you could see from the Taste map, it takes up a significant portion of the site, and we'll want to consider that as we move forward. And it makes a lot of sense to put the Taste out here. You have a blank slate, basically. You have athletic fields. It's very flexible. You could basically put anything out there, grandstand, you could put anything down, and it's really not going to harm that space. So when we start thinking about a downtown park, we're going to want to kind of tighten our pencils a little bit and start thinking about how we could better utilize space. Maybe things get moved, maybe things get consolidated a little bit. The challenge with the way this is operating right now is when these uses are gone, there's really nothing at the park that really defines your community, what's important to you. And I think what we bring is an understanding of making a park flexible, accommodating these large events so that the space is exciting, engaging, it reflects the community character if there's 5 people, 500 people, or 5,000 people. And we brought an example of a recently completed project that Walker Macy worked on. This is Portland Saturday Market in Portland along the waterfront. This is Mercy Corps' new headquarters that displace Portland Saturday Market, and the Saturday Market had to move out to the waterfront. We had to design a canopy for inclement weather. But the nice thing, and this is called Ankeny Plaza. Nice thing about Ankeny Plaza, this is a very effective space. It's flexible for the market. It accommodates play, it accommodates activities. You could put other events out here. Other events have started staging out here. But the interesting thing here is that it's very nice full, but even when it's empty, it's a very elegant space. It functions really well adjacent to the waterfront. It allows for circulation of people biking and running through the waterfront. And it just works well whether it's packed on festival days or if it's empty on a weekday. Another example that Laura Rose, the lead design principal from our firm, brings to this project is she worked on Discovery Green, a large downtown park project in Houston, of all places. This is 12 acres. Civic Field is just over 8 acres. And to frame this, Pioneer Courthouse Square is just shy of an acre. So you have a lot of land to work with. And that's good and that's bad, because when you have a lot of land to work with, you kind of have, going back to that picture of the ball field, you have a really expansive space. You don't have any place for respite. So when we start looking at planning Civic Field, we want to look at ways to break down the scale of that space. So you have areas of respite. You have what we would call outdoor rooms, where it could be garden-esque. It could be a buffer to the neighboring community. You could have your petanque courts integrated within kind of these garden areas and not just kind of haphazardly arranged in the site, but integrated with different site elements. So it just integrates better. You have better scaled spaces. You have spaces for festivals. You have spaces that have different functions, and that's something that we're going to look at as we move forward with design. We also want to think about designing for all ages, adults, teens, the elderly, you name it. We want this park to recognize everybody in the community and have a space that everybody could relate to within the park at the end of the day. That will be a successful park project. Same goes for kids. We want to make sure that kids feel welcome here, and it's a safe place for children to play. So potential park program. Again, this is a response to the interview questions from Carrie and her team. This is just a first blush approach at how we will tackle Civic Field and some initial thoughts. This isn't a solution. Its intent is to generate conversation from everybody in reaction. So what we've done as part of that interview process, we were asked to come with big ideas. We brought a list of program elements that we've seen in similarly scaled downtown parks, and we started arranging those on site. And a lot of so what we have here, these are diagrams and Anne Marie in a second is going to show a little.
Unveiling like Vanna Wyatt.
So what we had done in the interview was say, okay, going back to Anne Marie's discussion of how our edges on this park are, we have residential on the east, north, and south. Let's talk about maybe buffering some of those areas and integrating some of these elements within that buffer area. So you think of quieter elements that may want to be closer to the residential areas than the louder elements that may want to be in the center of the park. So thinking of integrating petanque with the garden areas, thinking about integrating tennis with these garden areas out and around the perimeter, and then having our active edges, whether it be a market space or a promenade or a water feature along that civic edge that could be a little louder, that could accommodate that use and really accommodates the kind of the civic nature of connecting to downtown. And then the center of the park remains kind of this active recreation space, flexible space for your festivals and different events that may get placed here now or in the future. So again, just really schematic ideas. Another idea is, what if we keep the grandstand on the south side of the site and we continue to use that for the taste? You have soccer fields in the middle that respond to that, keep that flexible, that keep that as your grandstand space and where your performances could happen. We wrap the north and the east with gardens, just like the last scheme. We integrate small, quieter sporting events, activities within that garden area. There could be areas of respite within that garden area. And then again, on the west side, we have a more active edge. As Anne Marie alluded to, we may want to think about having some sort of promenade or pedestrian connection that aligns with that Sprague right-of-way. Maybe integrating parking. Again, these are really rough ideas to spur conversation.
I'm going to jump in and add one thing to that. Just so you know, we also have we created the program pieces for the taste, because I realize you guys back there can't see the board yet. But we also have the pieces for the Taste of Edmonds out here, so you can really get a sense. The idea is that this is a model for us to sort of explore with you and with the community, to be able to have people sort of understand the scales of these spaces and the amount of space it takes to host certain programs. So when this is over, you'll be able to come up and we can kind of move the taste over and put some of these other pieces out, and you'll be able to see how a large performance space is almost the size of a soccer field, et cetera. So this is intended just to facilitate understanding of scale, types of program that can fit, and how we can kind of start this dialogue of distributing the program.
Mm-hmm. And I think this will be a useful tool too for the open houses, of having people engage with us, of moving different elements around and different configurations as we move forward. So that's the presentation. We want to get into a discussion with City Council, with you, Mayor, about how we move forward. We're here to really craft something that is reflective of your community, and we want to work with you in order to achieve that. And having your feedback and the most significant and robust public outreach process will make this a very successful effort.
Council, questions or comments? One thing I'd like to stay away from is designing the field this evening, which is a tendency. Probably all 7 of the electeds have some view of the way this should look. We'll try and hide that disposition tonight. But seriously, we need to open a discussion. I'm sure many of you have questions. I'll go Council President and Ms. Massaros, then Brady and Weeks.
I want to thank Carrie, first of all, for organizing this meeting. We had a conversation on the Civic Field one afternoon, just talking about how important it was to get the council on the same page, that we didn't want to wait till the end of the process and then, just see what everyone else had done and make a final decision, yes or no. I think this is just a tremendous opportunity for the city. We've never seen anything quite like this. So I just want to make sure we're giving it our best effort. And I think this kickoff is wonderful, and everyone in the audience who probably can't hear me can appreciate that we're doing this. And the whole idea is to get us on the same page, understand the schedule and where we fit in the process. So I want to thank you very much for that.
Mr. Mazzaros.
Thank you. One of the programmatic things that is happening in Civic Field now is the Boys and Girls Club. And so, and I'm not advocating one way or another, but you want to keep all the constituents happy around that, whatever that choice is. And it's an opportunity that could unfold. I was fortunate to be down in the North Scottsdale area, and there's a beautiful park called Thompson Peak Park. That's there in the North Scottsdale area on Thompson Peak Parkway. And there's a beautiful Boys and Girls Club right in that park. And they utilize, obviously, all the activities that the park offers, as well as have some programmatic things within the building.
Right.
As well. It's just integrated so nicely. And, ample parking and all those other things associated with it.
Yeah.
So it's a nice facility.
We have the Boys and Girls Club is represented on our project advisory team through Mike Eckelbarger, and we also have them scheduled as a stakeholder for an interview to see what their interest and intentions are. I know that they've had probably some similar conversations with council members in the past, so we'll move forward carefully on that one as well.
Yeah.
Councilmember Craven, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I've heard a lot of discussion tonight about keeping the bite, or the Taste of Edmonds, sorry, I almost said Bite of Edmonds. The Taste of Edmonds in this park, did you look at moving it to another location? Because it seems to me we're doing a lot of jiggling around to put that in there.
I think I can respond to that, and then you guys can. One thing that the Walker Macy team did mention in their interview was that we do have several large events that we host at Civic currently, and there's really not another site in Edmonds that could host such an event without a huge impact to that particular park or open space. And so one thing that impressed me a lot, and I think they'll bring to the table with us, is programming it for the 300 days out of the year for 40,000 residents that maybe don't take part in a large event, but being able to lay over those larger events and not impact the park as a programmable park, but to host the Taste of Edmonds for 3 days, or host the Wenatchee Youth Circus, or host the 4th of July celebration there for a day, and not have it take away from the rest of the park as we master plan it and want to program it for other activities in the community. So I'm hopeful that we'll, and that's part of the conversation this community will have. Do you want to continue to host the Taste there? I know we host a lot of, not a lot, but 3 or 4 major events, and there's really not another place in town to do that.
Follow up from Councilmember.
Yeah, that was basically my question. Have places like City Park and Anderson Center Field, and those have all been looked at. And I know there's parking issues wherever we go, because we don't have any parking area, well, except for City Park has a little bit of a parking area, but so that would impede any neighborhood it goes to. So I was just wondering if that had been looked at. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tyson.
This may not be a fair question because you don't even know what the project's going to be by way of design, but do you have a sense, Carrie, for order of magnitude what a project like this might cost the city?
It's going to depend. One thing I did talk to Chris about early in the process is, when we get farther into a preferred plan, coming up with some cost estimates, and also coming up with a phasing plan for those cost estimates, so that if the price tag is 10 to 12 million, let's take it in chunks and say what's going to be the best way to phase this in, so that we can afford it as a community and start to bring some things online at Civic sooner than rather than later. So an 8-acre site could be pretty significant depending on what we put on there. If this community says we just want complete open space, that won't be that expensive. But if we start to look at berms and meandering paths and program components, petanque courts and tennis courts and basketball courts and fields, and that adds up and reconfiguring what we have.
So, fair enough.
Carrie just needs to know which pot of money to apply. She's already got a list going. I happen to know that.
I'm happy to elaborate on that too,
Yeah,
as far
okay.
as dollars.
That'd be helpful.
From other park projects, I would say, a low ballpark estimate is $1 million an acre. That's pretty soft space. That's going with, having a lot of grass, a lot of lawn, a lot of simple landscaping, and that's kind of, call that the baseline. $1.5 million an acre is probably more realistic for this type of space, and then the sky's the limit.
I have one small thing I can add to that too, is I think we'd also be looking at infrastructural opportunities that we could align with. So if there's stormwater opportunity or anything, with adjacent streets, any upkeep, that those types of opportunities would be something to keep an eye out for in terms of also being able to put money that's allocated for infrastructure that might also have a park benefit or an mutual beneficial opportunity.
Our public works director is really good at that.
I would say one other thing to your point too I wanted to address is the, talking about the taste. You have a lot of space. 8 acres for a festival is a lot of space, and the more space you have, the more you're going to fill it. It's kind of like the fish in the aquarium. The fish is only going to grow. It's so big. If you give it a bigger aquarium, it's going to grow more. There's ways we could consolidate that, I think, and start looking at condensing some of that program use and making, spilling out on the street rather than taking over the park to make a richer park, I think would make logical sense. But I think there's ways to look at consolidating, and we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Councilmember Buckshins.
I just want to say, don't be daunted by the cost. That's what Larry Phillips always told me about the marsh, so I wouldn't be daunted. I do want to make a couple points. I'm glad you brought up the downtown Portland mall, or I call it the mall, but it's the area
Right, Courthouse
down.
Square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once they put that in, it became like, it just was vibrant.
Yep.
And then the waterfront's always been vibrant. But another place you might want to look is Charlotte, North Carolina. They have an urban downtown park, very artistic, leads right into the Mint Museum.
I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, so it's a great place to look. I do think it's important, though, that we do talk to our different shareholders or stakeholders, and I'm glad you have quite a few people that live around in the neighborhood in that area that are on the PAC, because I know that when I volunteered before for some of the events, people complain all the time about noise, more noise, loud. So I think that's important, and I also know that you, Carrie, and the mayor, when the whole senior center issue was going forward a couple of years ago, the Boys and Girls Club were very interested, as well as making sure that they have some sort of input into that. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be great, and like I said, we'll just don't be daunted, just move forward, and it'll come.
Councilmember Civic.
I'm really excited about this plan going forward. I think there's a historic opportunity for the city in the development of this park. One of the things that we've already talked about, and I think it's really obvious to notice, is that parking is probably going to be something of an issue. And one of the things that I'm wondering is if in the redevelopment of the park there might also be an opportunity to redevelop some of the walkway systems around the park, just to help people commute there by foot, or in some cases commute with mass transit options that maybe aren't as massive as, let's say, a city bus.
Sure.
So going forward, I really see, especially with the programming elements that you're talking about introducing, we're going to need a better way to get people there. If we're just doing events that are onesies and twosies around, during the course of the year, that we can, let's say, mobilize the city for shuttles and all of that. That would be one suggestion to look at and improving that. And then also just again a sense of history. I think there are very few cities that are fortunate enough to have a civic park like this right in the center of the city, surrounded by all of the elements that we have going on. I think it's really a remarkable gift for this city.
Can I ask you just a little follow-up question on that? When you talk about the sense of history, do you have a vision of how that plays out, or what conversation you want to have about that, or?
I do.
Okay.
I will,
Yeah.
I will defer to,
Oh,
Yeah.
actually, it's
Oh.
Mr. Teitzel.
oh, well, whoever.
Nice try.
That's right.
My understanding is our grandstands are in pretty poor condition and need to be either rehabbed in a major way or torn down completely. Now, one of these designs shows a grandstand there. Would it be a completely new structure, or what is your thought process about if they had a grandstand, what would it be?
Yeah. It is in very poor shape. We're right in the middle of doing a structural analysis of it, so we'll be talking about it as a council, as a community soon when we get that back. I'm very concerned about it being on site for too much longer without some work on it or without bringing it down. There is currently, as you probably all know, we do have some restrictions on our site that have to do with the grant money that we received to purchase it. And that particular area where the current grandstand is restricted, and it will not allow us to build a structure. So we can grandfather the grandstand in, or if we take it down, we'll have to figure out other seating arrangements for the larger events that we have. My understanding is the grandstands are used mostly for the larger events that we have, and then some. There was one comment I heard that they were the only stairs downtown and people like to run them for fitness. So that's the piece of it that we'll have to look at as well. I know that the grandstands also host storage for many of our community organizations. So that piece would have to be figured out as well. I don't think it's prohibitive, but if we end up in a month saying, look at this structural analysis and we really need to decide as a community to bring this down and figure out then in this master planning process how to accommodate the need that we have for them. A lot of big events rent bleachers to bring in, or grandstands. That's an option as well for some larger events. So those are my thoughts on that.
That's great.
No quick answer on that yet.
Councilmember Johnson?
Well, I wanted to build on what Councilmember Tibbet raised about the history of the area. For those of you that don't know, this was the playing field for the high school. That's why there are no trees there, because they played on that field. And what is now the Boys and Girls Club was originally the field house. That's where they stored all the equipment. So this was used every day for every clear day, and then on the rainy days they were in the gym. But basically it was football, baseball, and track. Those are the main events. And when Carrie and I were having that conversation in the park, I suggested that our Historic Preservation Committee might be interested in participating. That's why Emily Scott was invited to attend, and Councilmember Teitzel is also on that committee. And one of the things that we would like a little more information about is the historic value of Civic Field as it is in, I guess, the buildings themselves. Do they have historic value? Are the materials original? Are they, and maybe even the track itself, since it's been in continuous use for over 100 years, maybe that has some value. And I don't know if this is part of your contract or if you would have a subcontract, but I think working with the other people on the committee and Carrie, it would be really important for us to have that information before we get to the end and make a decision.
Yeah, good point.
Councilmember Buckles?
Another thing came to my mind, when Councilmember Yamamoto was on, he was really hip into the soccer or the hosting the tournaments. And I don't know if it was just soccer, but it was 3-on-3 and 2-on-2 and all that.
4-on-4.
4-on-4, 5-on-5 if you want to have a whole game.
Oh, like the hoop it up?
Yeah.
The question I have is that too small of a, we don't want to really concentrate on having it strictly an athletic play field, but is it too small to do some sort of tournament type events?
that type of tournament would be something that would be brought in. Like
Right.
when Spokane does their Hoop Fest, which is huge downtown, they bring in portable courts, they
Right.
just lay them all out, and it becomes Hoop Fest for the weekend.
They do it in the
And-
street.
And they do it in the street, exactly. And so I can see something like that, sort of on that active edge, bordering the Civic to host, and people can enjoy the park and play Hoop Fest in the street. And so it's something like that. I can't see it incorporating a bunch of courts into the Civic
Right.
Field, but to actually conceive of not just the Taste or the 4th of July, but are there a few other sports events we
Well,
want to bring in, and how do we accommodate those?
Well, and that's what I'm thinking is that, we can't just have it fix it for the taste. We need to start
Exactly.
thinking outside the box. And, I think it's, Edmonton, Canada is known as the festival city of the
Sure.
Canada. And I mean, we could be the festival city of Washington, So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's different things that we can think about, but it would be great to allow the chamber, because that's one of their main events,
Yeah.
to continue there. And who knows, maybe Rotary will move waterfront up there. I mean, you just never know. So, just a thought.
Terry, just a question for you. I'd like to be able to have the audience and the council members come up and play with
Yeah.
the movable pieces.
Yep.
But you have a council meeting that starts before too long.
Yep.
So I don't know
Yep.
if we want to continue with this. We might want to end the meeting officially and let folks have the play. Sound reasonable, council? Sure.
I'll just make one, because I've been quiet this whole time.
I'm sorry, it's too late.
I will just say, it seems to be the two words that I've walked away with so far is that we're looking at a park that needs to be flexible and adaptable. And we have clearly all these different potentials and opportunities, and so it's finding that balance between what's a park that we as a community of citizens are around 300 days of the year, and then the rest of those days
Yep. Absolutely.
beyond that. But anyway, it's
Yeah, and
real
that's,
exciting.
this exercise will be fun if we conclude the meeting and have people come up and look at how to move the pieces around. It's pretty visual, how you can see the scale and how you can see larger events lay over a very programmable park for the rest of the citizens. And that's why we did pick Walker Macy. It's just pretty dynamic to be able to think that way and figure out how to accommodate most of the citizens in the city first, and then the big, larger events that bring in the regional draw.
It would be good to give if Anne Marie could give, I thought Anne Marie could give a quick description before everybody gets up and starts moving parts and pieces of what we're doing here and the purpose behind it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I spoke briefly about it, so just one last time. I mean, you've got the program pieces out here for the Taste. So you guys will be able to really, I mean, these things are pretty giant. Food and main stage, takes up pretty significant. And you can kind of see how these things start to compare. You actually don't have a regulation soccer field out there at the moment, but that's kind of a pretty good scale for a large performance space. So these are just kind of the things that we're not out here. We've got market pieces and petanque pieces and all kinds of things that, as you saw, they actually have brought copies of, two of the schemes that we kind of put together before, so you can kind of see how those laid out over here. And, I just encourage you guys to come up and have a look and play around a little bit. See what you think.
Fair enough. So before we do that, there was a few things I did want to mention from Chris's presentation, just so that people can know and understand. One of the pictures that he showed was sort of the public process moving from the city council to the planning board, and that's going to be reversed in our public process. We're going to go through public house, open house, and then the other thing that wasn't in that schematic was our project advisory committee. We're really going to be meeting with our project advisory committee first before we even bring anything to the planning board and then the council. So I want people to understand the role of our project advisory committee. It really is to take all of this public input with the consultants and myself and narrow it down. And that is all laid out on the schedule that's in the council packet, and Diane's holding it up. But that is a very good, solid schedule, so if you have any questions about that, please let me know. The other thing that I did want to mention as well is that in the public outreach process, we're going to do a very similar public outreach process to Marina Beach, with the exception of we are actually going to be installing a kiosk at the park throughout the process. And we'll have an interactive, there'll be a roof over it for the rain, but we want to have an interactive way that people that are down at the park using the park can get a little short bio about what we're doing and interact with that kiosk and put dots and tell us what they're thinking.
Civic Field, you said Marina Beach.
Oh, no, I meant Civic Field.
Okay.
I meant Civic Field. We're going to install it at Civic Field so that it can be on site through the remainder or the duration of the master planning process, and people can weigh in on it that way as well. We will also be going out to our larger events and handing out little business cards that have the public open house meetings and the virtual open house meetings, so that we'll be able to get out in the summertime where we have a lot of people in the park on a daily basis to be able to engage the public in that. Val Stewart, who is on our project advisory committee, is also very committed to helping us connect with students. And so we will be getting students involved in this process, youth involved in this process. We also have a summer youth employment program this summer that will have 10 to 12 Edmonds Meadowdale High School students that will be working in our parks, and we're going to do a meeting with them to be involved in this planning process. So we just have some touches here and there, but I wanted to expand on that just a bit for people.
Councilmember Johnson.
Carrie, could you also expand on the restricted and unrestricted
You bet.
nature of the project?
Yes, I can. Because we have received money from both the state of Washington and Snohomish County Conservation Futures, those two entities really restrict our land to be open space and protected open space, active and passive recreation. The active recreation is restricted. It's restricted to the current use that we use now. So we do have some fields. We'll be able to use some fields there. No synthetic turf is allowed on that area. So it's, soccer fields or baseball field if we want fields. Petanque is fine to install. It has to be less than 10% impervious surface. So if we're going to do any walking paths at all or anything like that, it's going to be a hard surface, but mostly pervious surface that will be allowed on that site. If you recall the deeds of right and the conservation futures, there's 2 acres of the land that is not restricted, and that 2 acres is concentrated in the northwest portion of the property. If anybody wants a map, I can give you a map, but it's in the northwest portion, and in that section of the property, we are allowed to do impervious surface, structures, buildings. That happens to be currently where the Boys and Girls Club sits, the basketball courts sit, and the tennis courts sit. So that's the area. So if we're talking tennis courts, and we decide to put tennis courts in an area that's restricted, we're really going to have to make them not take up the whole area. We would be better concentrating them into the unrestricted area. So we're going to have to work with the state and the county when we get through our master planning. They're going to have to weigh in on it as well. But is that clear enough for you? Okay.
Okay, seeing no other comments, we will adjourn this meeting. We'll have a follow-up meeting, council, in about a half an hour. We are